Hello everyone, I'm Rania Khalek and this is Dispatches coming to you from Beirut, Lebanon. And I am joined by Palestinian icon and revolutionary Leila Khaled. Leila, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's so good to have you on and there's so much I want to ask you about. But I guess a good place to start is maybe at the beginning. Could you maybe talk a little bit about where you were born? Tell us a little bit about your childhood. What do you remember about Palestine and when did you leave?
I'm Leila Khaled. I was born in 9th of April 1944. I don't have a lot of memories with this young age in Palestine except for two things, the kitchen and the staircase. The staircase because we used to run when there was clashes between the Zionist groups, the militias and those Zionist military groups who were fighting against us and against the British police because they considered the British are occupying Palestine while they were coming to occupy Palestine. So, when there were clashes in front of the house, we used to run to go to the downstairs because our house was on the second floor. So, I remember the staircase when my mother used to tell us, catch it and go because she was afraid that we tumble down. So, the day she said she wanted to leave to Lebanon, and we were used to go to Lebanon in summertime, but in April, this is something new. And it was Deir Yassin massacre on the 9th of April also. So she was afraid, my mother. We didn't know where my father was, and we were 8 children. So when she counted us, she found me missing. So she asked one of the, because we were 8 children, to run down the stairs to hide, and there was a car coming to take us to Lebanon. So one of the neighbors, this I remember very well. One of the neighbors, a woman, came and my mother was screaming at me. She was calling me, but I didn't answer. So she said, "Why are you here?" There was a big basket with dates, and I loved dates. So I told her, "I'm afraid the Jews will take our dates, so I don't want to leave." This I remember it very well. So she said, "It's okay, you will." This my father brought it for us, not for them. And the word, I'm not mistaken by saying the Jews, because we had neighbors Jews, and I had a friend called Tamara also. So when we speak about Jews, those who were coming from outside, not who were living with, together, we lived together as Palestinians. So I told, no, I don't want to leave. So they brought me down. At that moment, a shell fell on the car that was waiting for us. So the neighbors told my mother, this she told me afterwards, don't scream at her, she is young and she wanted to take the dates, so she saved your lives. If you were with your children in the car, you would have vanished. This is one thing, and I remember my friend Tamara. I asked my mother, "Is Tamara and her mother coming with us?" She said, "No." I said, "Why we are going then? Let's stay here." So when she decided again to take us, because she was afraid after the news came out after the massacre of Deir Yassin, that they were killing women and children and rape them and like this. So she took us and she came to her relatives in Lebanon, in the south of Lebanon. The minute we arrived, we saw it was her uncle's house, my mother's uncle's house. We arrived there and we saw the oranges on the trees. And it was very near to the entrance of the house. So we wanted to cut the oranges. My mother screamed at us. She said, "This is not your oranges. You're not allowed to take it. Your oranges are in Haifa." Since that moment, I hated oranges.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because she said, "This is not yours, and you cannot have it." So these are my memories. And when we were on our road to come to Tyre, in the south of Lebanon, we saw people walking with their children, and my mother was crying. We cried with her, and this I remember because we were stuffed in the car. We were crying when my mother was crying because she saw also what we saw. So we arrived. Uh, a refugee childhood everywhere in the world is a miserable one. Just losing your homeland, this is by itself a disaster. It's the Nakba. And it is a Nakba really for the Palestinians, which is just its ongoing Nakba all the time since 75 years ago. I never had one pencil. I always had one half. My mother couldn't afford money. My father was absent. We didn't know where he was. He was with the fighters, so we didn't know. And then he was put in a detention camp in Egypt. Then he came afterwards, after 6 months maybe. I don't remember. He came, and this life was all the time. It's يعني you can give it a name, deprivation. That we were deprived from a book, we were deprived from a copybook. It's always cut in two. Yani for the children, for we were 8 children at that moment. So that was very miserable. Yani once one Eid came, it's I don't remember which Eid. It's a festival, religious festival. We didn't have new clothes, so we hated Eid also. Until now, I hate it because it reminds me of my miserable childhood, like all Palestinians, not only my family. At least my family had had relatives in Tyre, but not in the camps. And all the time, my mother always, when we say, "Why can't we have one book? Each one of us, every two should study in one book." And to have half a pencil and to have half an eraser. We are not like others. We are different. So it was very difficult for a child to accept that. And all the time we ask the question, the answer, because you are not in Palestine. You are not in Haifa. You are not in your house. This is not your house. And all the time, look, the camp was very near to the beach. He said, "Look, your people are living in tents. You are living under a ceiling, thank God."
Yeah.
So we had not to ask questions. All children ask their parents.
Of course.
So this is the life of every refugee, whether 75 years ago or today. It's the same. It's deprivation, especially from a homeland. A homeland is your identity. It's you. but we are numbers only. We were considered numbers.
I want to ask you, because obviously there were so many refugees, but you chose a path of resistance ultimately when you grew up. So what was it that politicized you? Because not every refugee becomes politicized. Was it you mentioned your father was active in resisting. Was it your family? Was it your friends? How did you end up in the resistance, I guess?
My eldest brother was studying at the AUB here in
The
Lebanon.
American University
Yes.
of Beirut, for those who don't know.
So he was a member of the Arab National Movement, which was founded by Dr. George Habash, Hadi Haddad, Dr. Hadi Haddad, and Dr. Ahmad al-Khatib from Kuwait, others, Hani al-Hindi from Syria. Yani it's an Arab movement to, to face the results of the Nakba. So my brother was one of them. Now it was a must and it's a duty for members of ANM, Arab National Movement, to teach his family and to organize them. So my brother organized my elder sisters. I was number 6 at the family, and we became 12 afterwards. Yes.
Big family.
So every one of us should teach the younger. So I was also taught by my sisters, and at school. The school was a tent. The first school, it's for the evangelical churches. So they put a big tent, and we were 4 classes in the tent. The first, second, third, and fourth grade. So we went to a camp, tent. Then every 15th of May, we had to go demonstrating in the streets, calling for our return all the time, every 15th of May. And this every Palestinian refugee knows and knew until now 3 dates. 15th of May, 2nd of November, this is the Balfour Declaration, and 29th of November, the partition resolution of Palestine in 1947. So these days were always, we were educated that these are the components of Nakba. The Balfour Declaration to give the Jews a homeland in Palestine. And 29th, it was yesterday, and we were commemorating that day. It takes me back in history at that time that always we were hoping to go back to Palestine, to our homeland.
And of course, you were attracted to ultimately the PFLP. So why? Why the PFLP?
The same leadership of, I became a member of ANM, and the ANM took a decision to have a chapter for the Palestinians, not for every, for the Palestinians after 1967, and founded the Popular Front. So I just moved from one movement to the other. It's a part of it.
It was the popular movement at the time. I actually do want to go back to the issue of the prominence of the left, but first I want to talk about a couple other things. I mean, you participated, you're famous, right, for participating in these 2 hijackings. And so I guess I'm curious, what motivated you to do that? It was something new. It must have been a scary idea because it's something so new? What was like going through your mind making the decision to be a part of this?
You know, it's not my decision only. I was preparing myself all the time when we went to the training camps to hold arms. And this is the political idea that we have to hold our cause by our hands as a people, because always we depended on Arab regimes to turn us back to Palestine, and they prevented us from being politicized, especially in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan, the same thing. So, you know, injustice is something unhuman. This is the first motivation, because I all the time felt like all refugees that we were living under injustice in our camps, in our place, wherever we are pointed at. You are a Palestinian, and you are a Palestinian, you are a refugee, you don't have a homeland, then you have no dignity. These all together are linked. All these words are linked as an accusation for the Palestinian. So it made me all the time, I didn't like this life, all this life, I didn't like it. Why we are here, why, and so on. Many questions always are raised in our minds. Now, by growing up more and more, knowing more and more, being conscious of what happened to us, it's also our duty to resist. And we used to be educated with the history of Palestine in the Arab national movement also. In PFLP, of course, after 1967. So it was my dream to hold arms, and I held arms.
Was that unique since you were a woman? Were there other women as
No,
well?
there are a lot of women.
Yeah.
And there were also women at that, in 1968, women in Palestine were put in jail because they also held arms, and they made operations, in military operations, and they were the first to be in jail, women.
How do you respond, and I'm sure you've had to respond to this many times, to the accusations from the Israelis, from the Americans, that this is all terrorism, what you did is terrorism, and you're a terrorist? And
You know, until now, the United States and Israel don't accept to make all the calls for holding an international conference by the United Nations to define what is terrorism. For me, for us, the peak of terrorism is occupation. You know, the peak of terrorism in the old century is also the Nazis, the fascists. These are the terrorists. The thieves are terrorists. So when we say terrorism, it means those who make evil, evil things. This is in general meaning. But as for occupation and kicking out the people from their homes and lands and cities, and kick them out of their country, this is the peak of terrorism. So when they speak, they don't want to have to hold a conference, international conference, to define who is the terrorist. Is it the countries or the individuals? Now, there are a lot of things has been done during all that, but I think terrorism is very much clear in occupation.
I'm curious what your thoughts in that sense then are on Palestinian resistance today, right? So you were part of, I mean, you obviously you're still doing work now, but it's very different work than before. But there does still exist Palestinian resistance in different forms. There's armed resistance in different forms. What are they doing right? What mistakes are they making? And I guess maybe more importantly, what are mistakes of the past that you think the current generation involved in resistance activities can learn from?
Let me say that any people under oppression, whatever the kind of oppression, whether it's a regime, whether it's apartheid, whether it's occupation, people have the right to resist by all means, including armed struggle. This is in the United Nations Charter, Item 8. So, we are not the first people to use arms for our freedom and for our liberation. It's a history that we studied that people began to resist when they are conscious of oppression. When people know that they are oppressed, then they have to do something, either to give up or to resist. They don't have any other choice. So we as a people, we learn on also from our history. At least in the early centuries, Spartacus had a revolution, the revolution of the slaves in the Roman Empire. It means that when people realize that they are under oppression, then they act directly. This is their duty. This is not a choice. We don't have the luxury of choices. We have one choice, is to resist our oppression. Now, they speak about us as terrorists and so on. We don't care about what they say. We care about what we do also. And of course, there were mistakes, I'm sure, because we were, it means that we make mistakes. But we also review, every time we review, from one era to another era, the means of resistance. First of all, we only thought that only armed struggle. But it didn't mean that we don't care about other things. We discovered that no, we can resist also on the international level. We are not alone in a besieged island. We are part of the world. We are part of the human beings on this globe. So we have another means also of resistance. But the mainstream is armed struggle, because you cannot face the hegemony of the imperialists and Israel, a nuclear arsenal on our land. And how can we face it? We don't have the same weapons that they have, the most sophisticated technology. We are a small people, but we can resist in our means that hurt the enemy. So it's our duty, and nobody has to criticize us about that, because we want justice. We cannot just by praying to God to send us justice. No, we have to do it by ourselves.
So obviously the PFLP has remained very critical of the trajectory of other parts of the Palestinian movement, which, today you have something that's very common when it comes to resistance is you have an attempt to co-opt, right, by imperialist powers. And in the case of Palestine, you have certain leaderships that have been co-opted that are a part of this ongoing, never-ending charade of a peace process. So what are your thoughts on this peace process?
There is a process, but this is not a peace process. And this is a settlement, a political settlement. And by experience now, I'm not speaking about before Oslo. any settlement which doesn't deal with the core issues of the conflict. What are the core issues of our cause? It's the land, who to be sovereign, and the refugees. Half of the Palestinians are refugees now, to go back to their homeland, and this is by international law. I don't care very much, anyhow, to speak about now, about international law, because the ones who did it were those who were in the after the Second World War, and about human rights and all these fancy things. Fancy, I feel it. It's something fancy. It's not the realities of life. Now we are suffering from since before 1948 until now, and still we hear voices from America and Tel Aviv that human rights are violated. Which human rights they are speaking about? They are not the ones to distribute democracy and to distribute who is good and who is bad, like Bush said, the evil and unevil. And anyhow, I think that when we speak about injustice, this means that there is a deep oppression in our situation. We are facing apartheid, supported by the United States with all means, to keep Israel alive and powerful in the area, not only in Palestine. Now, there is recently the fifth time of elections brought another terrorists to the authority in Israel. The elections wasn't between the right and left. It was between the right and the more right in Israel. And there is a deep division now in Israel, because they compete how much Palestinians they kill every time in their elections. What is this state? This is a state, an apartheid state. It's a state of just to kill, shoot to kill all the time. Every day, we see Israel is killing people in the streets and trying to suffocate them from even breathing oxygen in their places. And of course, they have their project. It's genocide for the Palestinians.
And this was always, I think for the most part understood across the region, but in the last, I would say maybe 10 to 15 years, there's been a bit of a split, not necessarily over the issue of Palestine, but over other issues that impact Palestine. And here I'm talking about the war in Syria, for example. There was a lot of different splits and fights over how to deal with the war in Syria. Was this really a revolution, or was it a color revolution, or was it a legitimate uprising, right? You also have the issue of Iran, which has become a very polarizing issue across the region, where even some people who say they support Palestinian rights will say that they're against Iran. So I guess my question is for you is, how do you, as a leftist, as a somebody who's in the PFLP, you've been a long time advocate and participant in Palestinian resistance against imperialism, how do you understand these issues of Iran, Hezbollah, and Syria, and their importance in the broader cause of resistance across the region?
Look, these are, first of all, we have to differentiate between the parties and the states. Iran is was established deep in history.
Right.
So nobody will say that this Iran, from the beginning, they were supporting the Palestinians. No, there were no issue like that. But now this is a state who has the right to develop itself by itself without any pressure from anyone. And the international police is the United States. They want the countries to be built in their way, not in the people's way. This is something, and Syria is also deep in civilization. Syria was founded, and the whole area, this whole area, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, called بلاد الشام in Arabic, يعني the land of the Sham. Now they turned this word into Samists, anti-Semists. They say it's not anti-Semists, it's anti-Shamis, because this is the land of the Semites. So Hezbollah is a Lebanese party. His land was occupied, and they wanted to liberate it. And this is their right. And Syria was supporting Hezbollah. Syria was supporting the Palestinian revolution also. We were in Lebanon here, we were supported also by other Arab countries, especially the people, not all the regimes. So we differentiate between these two. And يعني, how can I understand that the United States considers Iraq is its national security, as if it's on the borders of Oklahoma or New York, and they invaded it, occupied it, because they wanted to take the oil. It's not because they want to spread democracy in Iraq or in any other country. And also the attack against Syria, the same thing, for the same reason. The reason that these countries are out of the what was drawn for from the project, the American project and the Zionist project in this area. So for this reason, they are against them, and we have seen what destruction happened in these countries until now. It's going on. This is beside what's going on in Palestine.
So I want to ask you about the Arab left. And it's a big question, it's a hard question maybe, but what happened to the Arab left? Because I mean, coming up in the struggle during your generation, it was almost automatic. It seems like it was mostly automatic that you would end up in the left because of the leadership of the struggle at the time. But today, that's not the case, right? Today, a lot of resistance takes the form of a religious identity. And it's not necessarily anti-leftists, but it's certainly not left, right? So I guess my broader question here is, what happened to the Arab left? Where did it go? And do you see a future for a left in this region?
The ideas of the left was at the time began in the Arab countries, began after the Second World War. Why? Because also there is a pole now after the Second World War, which is the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union revealed the intentions of the West towards this area. In the first World War, they divided by Sykes-Picot the Arab countries after Turkey was lost the war. Now, and then after Nasser's regime began the idea of socialism. In Palestine, it was there, but it wasn't as deep as يعني opened because the first Communist Party was in Palestine in 1919, but it wasn't يعني adopted by the people. Still, the countries are still not independent. So this began to grow when other countries began to follow up Nasser's regime, like in Syria, in Iraq afterwards, and even the parties who were there at that time. The Communist Party, for example, in Lebanon or Syria or Palestine or whatever, all these in Sudan. Then they began the thinking of socialism. Why socialism? This is a question. We were Arab national movement. We believed in the unity of the Arabs, the Arab world, the Arab for Arabs in those countries which were divided. But now the influence of the Soviet Union and the socialist countries began to grow in this area. But the regimes were not with the left. Then the left was divided in different countries. Now, if we want to go through history, religion is also a component of these societies.
Of course.
So sometimes it's used against the communists, against the left. While in Palestine, it wasn't used this way because the Palestinians were faced by the Zionist invasion and half of the population became refugees. It didn't, although it was in 1936, as Din al-Qassam, he was sheikh, and he led also the revolution, the armed revolution, but he was assassinated. And then others came while from religious origin, thinking, let me say. And our countries are Islamic countries. They have the culture of Islam. Although there are other ethnicities and there are other Christianity was born in Palestine, and Islam from the Arab peninsula, even Judaism from Palestine also. It was this is a combination of other ideologies, but the main ideologies became either nationalist, like Arab movement, Arab national movement, or socialist, like Ba'ath party in Iraq and in Syria and in different other countries, and communists. So these were coexisting together for the national struggle. But all of them were with Palestine, while some of the communists recognized Israel.
Right.
And this is the beginning also of the division among the left. Now, when the Soviet Union collapsed and the whole countries, the socialist countries, really the left in the world, not only in the Arab countries, also in the West, also in Europe, in America, in everywhere, was this is a defeat for for the countries, but not for the ideas.
Yeah.
And now there, some years now after the 90s, there are many tries, experiences to unite again, the left to unite in each country. Some movements now became on the international level, like student movements, like labor movements, and they are calling back for socialism and for justice and for democracy and so all these and this ideology. But up till now, and the attack against the left is very fearful everywhere, not only in one and this in Palestine also. We have division and we need to unite again. We are playing a big role to unite because we cannot achieve victory while we are divided. So we have to unite and to go forward.
Well, speaking of the attack on the left, or just generally speaking, an attack on any anti-imperialist forces in the region, we have the Gulf states, which have, a few of them at least, have normalized with Israel officially through the American-led Abraham Accords. And I'm just curious what your thoughts on the prospects of this actually accomplishing anything are. I mean, we're watching the World Cup in Doha, where Israelis are welcome, supposedly, but they haven't been very welcome on the streets by even Qataris and Saudis, which has been an interesting thing to watch. But do you think that these normalization deals actually represent anything? Do they actually mean anything?
Of course, it means it means a lot, and to have these countries who are signing any accords or treaties or whatever it is, and to normalize. I don't say it normalize, and they are just and they are.
They already were, right? They already had a decent relationship.
Yes,
it's just official
they
now.
have a relationship from more than 1 year or 2 years. And they were playing under the table all the time. So it came up. But for the people, we have seen that very clearly, not only on the Arab level, for the people who were holding the Palestinian flag all the time and not accepting to speak to any Israeli. Not only the Palestinians, not only the Lebanese, not only the Qataris, they were singing for Palestine and with other people also from around the world who are participating there. And we could see that I saw one American woman was saying, yes, I visited Palestine, so I'm with Palestine, although they are not participating in the Mondial. This means that people will be conscious how to face these treaties that happened in the Gulf, because the Israelis are coming to be the leaders of the region. This is the main project for the Zionists.
So when we talk about a way to resolve this conflict, you have people who are still talking about two states, but I think we probably both agree that there is no such thing as two states. There is, like, what second state is there going to be? You have other people talking about one state. Do you think that that's a possibility in the future, having like one state where everyone has equal rights?
From the beginning of the revolution, we have offered what is our goal from the revolution is to liberate our land from occupation. And then we were asked another question: what are you going to do after liberation? The one who asked this question is the West, and not any other one. The others understand what means liberation, and it means to fight until you let the occupants leave. So we said to build a democratic state in Palestine where we who are living there now and who are going to come back to return. There we decide the future of this land. And this is a human, a democratic goal, I think. And up till now, we say, what is our goal? This is our goal. This is the strategic and the historic solution. There is no other solution because they tried in Oslo, and we have seen what happened until now. The Palestinian Authority is the client of the occupants now. They are playing the same role, or they are helping the Israelis to face those who are resisting now, or demonstrating even. And Oslo did not deal with the core issues of the conflict. So it's a settlement that ended in 1999, and now they are. Sharon said years ago that there is no Oslo anymore, and Israel is not abiding by any signature on anyone.
For people who are only familiar with your name because of like hijackings and armed resistance in the past, I'm curious, what do you want them to know about your work since? Because you still are doing so much work.
Of course.
Always. It's actually amazing. You have more energy than I do.
Maybe because I began my struggle after 1967. Nobody knew me or knew any one of us. But because I have done something different, something is not any ordinary. So they looked at me as something coming from another orbit. Why? I'm a human being. And I feel myself, I continued the struggle. There are a lot of work for it to mobilize, and especially on the women's level. For 20 years, I was in the executive committee of the General Union of Palestinian Women, and this is the leadership of women in Palestine, and outside Palestine. So I gave a lot for about 20 years. I was working on the women's field. At the beginning, I didn't want to do that because I wanted to hold arms only. And Dr. George Habash told me, "You are a woman, you want to speak about your comrades and sisters in jails and to speak about women. Do you want me to go to speak about women?" And you are? No, you don't want to. So you have to work on that field. And this made my mind open to a new field that I didn't do it before. I was in the students' movement before, but not in the women's field. This gave me the opportunity also to know how to deal with differences among the leadership. Everyone with different ideology. But it didn't mean that we didn't have anything in common. We had a lot in common. And at the same time, I had the opportunity to go to the world outside through conferences, seminars, and for women. At the same time, I'm working on the political level under the name of PFLP, also to continue and to make relations with other parties, to go for any other parties in the world. And we had a lot of people coming from outside Palestine, from Venezuela, from Latin America, from Europe, from Japan, from different countries. Even my comrade who was on the Al Hal plane, who was killed by the Israelis from Nicaragua because we had relations with his party, the Sandinistas. This opened our eyes more and more conscious when we speak that we are a part of the people's revolutions all over the world. This is in practice now, not only as something theoretical thing. No, and this gave me also, I began to know more and more about other people, not only the only one that are under injustice. No, there are a lot of people. Those who, the Red Indians in the United States and Canada, people in Australia also, they were the same thing what happened in Palestine. And they made, the Europeans made massacres there. So we have to know more and we to exchange experiences. And this strengthens our movement also.
Leila, I want to thank you so much for spending time, giving us an hour of your time and breaking all this down. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Most welcome, always, always most welcome.